In this video we will talk about the creation of the intermediate certificate. Now, as you remember from the previous video, we said that the intermediate certificate is a certificate that signs and trusts other certificates on behalf of the root certificate. This is the main objective of the intermediate certificate. Now, having said that, let's start doing the intermediate certificate. The first thing we need to do is that we need to create an open SSL.cnf file that suits and fit for the intermediate certificate. The easiest way is that we copy the root certificate open SSL.cnf file, we copy it here, then we open it and make some changes on it. These changes will fit for the use of the intermediate certificate. So let's start doing this. The first thing is that we need to change the directory. The next thing is that we need to copy the OpenSSL file .cnf to the intermediate directory. Okay, have been copied. Now let's open this file and start making some changes. Sudo nano intermediate open SSL.cnf. The changes are very few, and it will consist here at this sector of the CI default. The first thing is the directory. As you see here, for the root certificate, this is the directory. Now for the intermediate certificate, we will create an intermediate directory. The rest are already the same here. Now here for the root certificate, we will make it as intermediate certificate, intermediate cert. Now one thing to notice, I advise you to do it, don't use the .pim extension, use the .crt, and the reason is why. When you will move this intermediate certificate to your client machine, to your user machine, if the client machine uses the Windows operating system, Windows in general doesn't like the .pim extension, even doesn't use it. Windows prefer the .crt extension, so it's better from this stage that you create the certificate with the .crt extension. Now here we will make intermediate CRL, the root key we will make it intermediate key, and the other thing is here we will make it, because this will fit for the intermediate certificate. That's it. These are the changes. Now we save them. Yes, out. That's it. The next step is that we need to create few directories. So let's change to the intermediate directory. Okay, sudo make directory CRL CSR. The CSR is the certificate signing request directory. Certs new certs private. Okay, these are the directories that we need to create. We need to create the other two files, the index.txt file and the serial and file and the CRL file. So sudo touch index.txt sudo chmod 700 index.txt and finally sudo echo 1000 to the index file. Okay, I believe it should be 777. Okay, and now we need to create the serial file. Sudo sh-c echo let's say 100 to the serial file. We need to create another file by the name of CRL number. These are the certificate revocation list numbers. Whenever you revoke a certificate, means it's a certificate that expires. This is a revoked certificate, so you also need to keep track of these revoked certificates, and you give them a number. Okay, now done. These are the directories and the files that we need to do. Let's go back to our main directory. Now the first thing we need to create when we want to create the intermediate certificate, obviously, is to create the intermediate key, and the way to do that is sudo OpenSSL GNRSA-AES256. Again, I'm using this algorithm. You are free to use whatever algorithm, and the output file will be intermediate directory private and intermediate key .pem, and we use 4096 bit for the encryption. This is the way to create the intermediate key. Okay, you make a strong passphrase, confirm it. Now you have the intermediate key ready for the use. Now the next step is that you limit the access to this intermediate key only to the root. Obviously, you might know sudo chmod 400 or the intermediate private intermediate key .pem. Okay, done. We have limited the key access. Now from here we will start create a certificate signing request. Now this certificate signing request will have a new thing. It will have the name of the entity that you want to sign and trust it using your intermediate certificate. So the common name here will be different, since the intermediate certificate sign and other certificates. Let me show you the way. So sudo, let's create the CSR file, OpenSSL request, the config flag. Now we use the intermediate /OpenSSL.cnf. Notice when you make the intermediate certificate, you need to use this extension. The configurations that is available at this file, not at the root certificate OpenSSL.cnf. New SHA-256, the key that we have generated. and the output file will be again intermediate at the CSR folder, the certificate signing request, and then intermediate CSR dot pem. So this is the middle step, is that you need to create a certificate signing request, which will be like in this code, the OpenSSL request config. Here you have to give attention that you need to use the configurations of the intermediate file, not the root file. So you have to give the right location, the new SHA, the key you use, which we have just created it, and the output file will be at the CSR directory. Okay, enter the passphrase of the key, enter your details. In this case I'm entering, by the way, the same details as since this is just for a tutorial, but in your case you need to enter in here the certificate of your entity. Remember that you need to enter your entity, the IT division. Here the server, a fully qualified domain name or your name. Now you are signing now for other entity, so you need to enter that entity, but in my case I will enter the same one because for tutorial purposes, but you have to be careful here. So www.studymatepro.net and the same email, info@prohorizon.net. Skip these two things. Now you have the certificate signing request. Now the next step is that we create the intermediate certificate. And the way to do that is like this way. Sorry, I had to drink some water. Sudo OpenSSL x509 request dash ext file, extension file, which will be intermediate OpenSSL.cnf, and the extensions. Remember here the extension will be v3 intermediate CA, as since we are making an intermediate certificate, so we need this extension. Then the next step is we use the certificate that we have created, the root certificate that we have created previously, which is the, I believe it's at the certs folder, and the root cert.crt. Then we use the key, the root key as well, the CA key, which I believe it was at the private folder, root key.pem. And then we use the CA create serial, and we give it a period. Now usually the intermediate certificate should be less than the period of the root certificate. In the root certificate we selected 10 years, let's say that we for the intermediate certificate we will select 5 years, which is supposed to be 1825 days. Now the input file here will be the intermediate directory, the certificate signing request, and the intermediate csr.pem, and the output file will be intermediate certs as well, and the intermediate cert.crt. Now let's go through this code, this lengthy code, step by step. The first thing you need to do is that you sudo use the OpenSSL, the X509. You have to request, because this is a request for a certificate, and the extension file, which will be the OpenSSL file of the intermediate certificate. And the extensions here, you need to be careful. You need to use the v3 intermediate CA. Now here, as you remember, the CA will be true because this is used as a certificate authority, and we have to sign this intermediate certificate by the root certificate that we have created already, using our key that is at the root key, and we create the create serial. We give it a days which is less than the root certificate. It's up to you to decide. In my case, I choose it half of the root certificate period. And then you take the certificate signing request that we have just created here, and you output it to this intermediate certificate.crt. This is the entire process. Now let's do it. Enter the key, the passphrase. Now you have a certificate signing, or sorry, you have now the intermediate certificate. The next thing to do is that we need to limit the access to this certificate, as you know before. So intermediate certs intermediate cert.crt. Okay, now let's take a look at this intermediate certificate, how it looks like. So sudo OpenSSL X509 no out and text, and the input file is intermediate certs intermediate Okay, this is our intermediate certificate. Let's take a look and see what are the distinguishing things. The first thing is the issuer. The issuer is this is the owner of this intermediate, and it will be issued to other guy. As you remember, I used the same one because it's for tutorial purpose, but in your case you have to add that entity which you want to sign it and trust it. The RSA the same, the key is the same, 4096. Here is again another important thing. The certificate, intermediate certificate, should be true, because this intermediate certificate we will use it to sign and trust other certificates. So the CA should be true in this case. Okay, now we have reached to this stage. Now when any application like a web browser tries to verify a certificate signed by intermediate CA, it must also verify that this intermediate certificate has been signed against the root certificate. So when the browser gets this intermediate certificate, it also needs to check that this intermediate certificate has been signed and trusted by a root certificate. So the way to do that is that we make a chain of trust. What does that mean? We mean we concatenate the root certificate with the intermediate certificate together in a file, and we present to the web browser. In this case, the web browser will check that this root certificate is already registered with that browser, so he will trust this intermediate certificate. This is the operation. The web browser usually, or in Java in general, they have the root certificates all mentioned all over, thousands of root certificates providers. They are all registered in there. So when you concatenate your root certificate with the intermediate certificate and present it to the server will realize that this root certificate is authenticated, therefore the intermediate certificate is also authenticated. This is the process. How we can do this, how we can verify that this intermediate certificate have been signed and trusted by the root certificate. And to do that is sudo open SSL verify the CA file, certificate file, which is the root certificate .crt. We verify it against the intermediate certificate. So we will verify this intermediate cert against the root certificate. If the verification is done, if we get an OK result, that means the verification is correct and this intermediate certificate did have been certified, signed and trusted by this root certificate. So let's check in our case. Okay, you see we have got OK. That means everything is correct. This intermediate certificate have been signed and trusted by this root certificate. Okay, now we need to concatenate the root certificate with the intermediate certificate to create the chain of trust certificate. In the course of what I was doing, I got an error, and I'll show you that error, so maybe it will be useful to you. Now let's do the sudo cat intermediate certs intermediate cert.crt, and we concatenate with the certs root cert.crt, and we output it to a file intermediate certs. The file name is up to you. You can choose whatever name. I choose the name of root chain cert.crt. Now if you do it this way, you might get a permission denied. Most likely you will get a permission denied. So how you can do that? It's better if before you do this you make sudo -s. Before you write anything of all of this, you just write sudo -s. You then enter your user password, then you write this line of code. You got my point? Because if you directly write this line of code, you will get a permission denied. So better, before you write this line, you write sudo -s, then enter your user password, and then you write this line of code. As you can see now, we have created our chain of trust root certificate. Now the next step is that we change the ownership of this certificate, and the way to do that is very easy. As you know, all 444 intermediate certs and root chain certs.crt. Very well. Now if you want to take a look about this, I don't think you will, it's up to you if you wish to look, but this is the end of the creation of the intermediate certificate. We created the certificate, the intermediate key, the intermediate certificate signing request, and then the intermediate certificate. Then we verified this intermediate certificate to the root certificate. Once the verification succeeded, then we concatenate them to each other, and this new root chain certificate will be presented to the server or to any web browser, so to make sure that this intermediate certificate is authenticated. Now this is the end of this video. In the next video we will talk about the server certificate. Thank you for watching.